Hi, my name is Mike McKenna, and I'm a patient educator here at NeuroPace with the patient education team. You're here today because you have RNS surgery scheduled soon, or maybe you just had your RNS surgery and you're back at home. Either scenario, I'm sure you have many questions. Today's session is designed to provide you with answers to your important questions so that you know what to expect moving forward with living with your new RNS system. Disclosing a little bit about myself, I was diagnosed with epilepsy over 30 years ago, and I've been living with the RNS system for close to 17 years myself. During today's session, I'll be sharing some of my experiences living with RNS, including how the RNS system was useful for my overall epilepsy and wellness care. So let's get started talking about living with your new RNS system. So the RNS surgery, it's usually a 1 to 2 night stay in the hospital. Majority of people, it is a 1 night stay in the hospital. First couple of days after getting home, many people are experiencing the effects of anesthesia. So you might be tired and have a headache until those anesthesia meds flush out of the body. Pain meds take care of any pain the first few days. Usually about a week and a half to 2 weeks after surgery, the majority of people are back doing what they were doing before surgery. Another question that gets asked is about hair. A lot of people ask me, like, if they go in for RNS surgery, do you have to shave your head? I always encourage people to talk with their neurosurgeons. Every appointment that you have, say that you want to protect your hair. There's no guarantee, but definitely advocate for yourself. Neurosurgeons today are very cognizant about the importance of hair. So today, the operating room staff can actually braid the hair out of the way where they want to make the incision. And they also have specialized hair clips that can clip that hair out of the way so that after surgery, the braids can be removed, the clips removed, and the hair can flip back over that area. So definitely talk with your neurosurgeons about your hair. Just like any surgery anywhere on the body, the doctors are going to say, don't do anything strenuous, no heavy lifting for like 4 to 6 weeks after surgery. But getting back just to daily light life activities, it's really about the day you're discharged from the hospital. So the recovery from RNS surgery is pretty quick. Many patients have shared with me that they went through the stereo EEG, and their recovery from that, once they got home, is very similar to their RNS recovery too. So if you had stereo EEG, you got home, what you did for that recovery, just kind of learn from that and take it over to your RNS recovery too. So one thing that's important to remember is in the operating room, your RNS device, when it's put in, it's turned on only to record. So there is no stimulation turned on in the operating room. So for the first month, all your RNS device is doing is recording those seizure fingerprints, like what your seizure activity looks like. Stimulation is usually turned on at 1 month based on the first month of seizure activity that's being captured. So how do you get the data from your head to be available to your doctors to be prepared for that 1 month appointment? So right before surgery, you'll be given your own RNS tablet. Within the tablet bag are some components that I'll pull out just so you can see what's in here. First thing to pull out is the manuals. First manual to read is the patient manual. The second one is the tablet manual on how to use your tablet. And there's a quick reference guide that you can quickly reference about using your tablet. Also within the bag is a handheld wand. And this is going to be the tool that you transfer your data from your device in your head to your tablet. And here's what the tablet looks like. So earlier I mentioned that when the RNS device is put in, it's turned on only to record. So there is no stimulation turned on. So for the first month, all this RNS device is recording your seizure fingerprints, but you have to be able to get it from your head to be available to your doctors. So that's where this RNS tablet comes in handy. In the beginning, we try to ask patients to do their data transfer often in the beginning. A lot of patients just find that every day is a great time to do it. They find a routine that works for them. Some people send their data first thing in the morning. Some people send it at night, right before bed. There's really no set time that you have to send your data. You also want to try to send it, even if you went through the day and you thought, I didn't have any seizures today. I'm just going to skip downloading today. You still want to try to transfer your data often in the beginning. because there might have been seizures that were captured that you weren't even aware of, like in your sleep, or that seizure activity that I was mentioning earlier that a lot of people just aren't aware of going on. If you miss a day or a few downloading your data, don't worry about it. It's just building this routine to do this. So as you also remember, I also have the RNS system. So what I'm going to do while I'm talking to you is I'm also going to be collecting my data. So remember the wand that was out in the bag? So what I'm going to do with this wand is I'm just going to place it where my RNS device is located. Your device might be in different areas of your skull, but this is where you're going to place the wand over your device. So what I'm going to do now that I know I have it over my device is I'm going to hit a button on my screen. And right now there's a little connection between this wand and the device in my head. And it's now transferring all the data through this wand to this tablet. What this is going to do is it's going to free up the memory space on the device for many more of those seizure recordings. Once all the data is collected, the tablet automatically connects to whatever Wi-Fi you've hooked it up to, like your home Wi-Fi, your cell phone if it's a hotspot. And then in about 30 seconds, all that information is sent to the NeuroPace computer server that your doctors will log into to see how you're doing. That's also referred to as the Patient Data Management System, or PDMS. So right now, my data was just successfully sent to PDMS, and I can put my wand down and my doctors now have access to my data. So what I'm going to do after I'm done is I just hit continue and I turn my tablet off. So that's it. I can put everything away. When you see your doctors at the 1 month mark, that's usually when stimulation is turned on based on this first month of seizure activity that you're sending. When they turn stimulation on, the doctors have a tablet that's very similar to yours and also a wand. And so during that appointment, the doctors you'll ask you to hold your wand over your RNS device. The doctors will hit a button on their tablet screen, and then in about 1 to 2 minutes, all the programming changes get done via that little connection between the wand and the device itself. You can't feel when any of that stimulation settings are being adjusted. So you'll just be sitting there talking to your doctors just like you and I are talking now. After that adjustment is made, then the follow-up schedule in the beginning is usually every 3 months. Eventually, these appointments can be stretched out to every 6 months, eventually every year. But just kind of plan on, in the beginning, going in to see your doctors every 3 months. These are just like your normal neurology appointments that you have now, except for maybe the first 15, 20 minutes is about RNS, and then the rest of the appointment is just what you normally see your doctors for now. When they turn stimulation on, they start very low and slow with stimulation settings. It does take time to make these adjustments, to gain these insights. So in the beginning, there might be times where you still experience seizures or you have a breakthrough seizure. I can tell you from personal experience, it's very easy to focus on that breakthrough seizure and think that this RNS thing is not working. But this is where that seizure diary comes in very handy so that you can document it, possibly what you were doing before that seizure happened, bring that to your appointments, and the doctors will show you what happened on that day for that breakthrough seizure, what steps they're going to do to try to prevent it from happening again. During those appointments, the doctors will also be showing you how over time they're not lasting as long. And they'll be showing you all the seizures that were stopped. That's all positive signs for you that things are getting better. You're going in the right direction. So now you've been living with your RNS system for a while, and you probably still have some questions. One common question that gets asked of me is what's the battery levels at? So the battery in the RNS device lasts just shy of 11 years. So at one of these follow-up appointments that you and the doctors will be having in about 11 years, you'll be talking about a replacement surgery. When they replace the battery, they actually replace the device itself because that device is all sealed one unit. So this is when the neurosurgeon comes back in the picture. And what the surgeon will do is they will make a small incision in the skin right next to the device. They remove the old device from the tray it's sitting in, unplug the leads, plug a new device in with the same settings as the device you just took out. They put it back in the tray, suture the skin back up. Checking in the hospital, checking out takes about 5 hours for that because it's an outpatient procedure that takes about 30 to 45 minutes to do. When you have this discussion about a replacement surgery with your doctors, you'll have plenty of notice. You'll have 3, 6, 9 months notice that you should start planning a replacement surgery. Another question that gets asked is are there any life limitations? Do I have to do anything special now that I have this in my head? I mean, I've had it for close to 17 years and I've never not been able to do something in life. The way it's secured in place, it's almost as hard as your head. So you'll be talking with your doctors about, life activities, when you can get back to, going to the gym, when you can get back to work. You'll be talking with your doctors about that. Another question that gets asked is medications. So with the RNS system, with all this data that's being collected and you're sending, the doctors can actually use that data to manage your medications. So with RNS, yes, you still take medications with RNS, but with that said, the goal with getting the RNS system is to help someone reduce or possibly remove some medications if they're on multiple meds. If down the road, if your doctors were to say, you know what, after looking at your data these many months, we actually feel like this medication would be better suited for you, so it could provide some great insights to medication management. As you've probably experienced taking these seizure meds, they're not very brain, mind, body friendly. They have a lot of severe side effects. I used to have issues with thinking and memory and toxicity, always being tired. So my doctors, using my RNS system over the course of 6 months, they were able to slowly reduce and remove 3 medications that I was on that had all those severe side effects. When we started reducing those medications, they started me on a new medication for me, Onfi, at 10 milligrams once a day. And so my doctors, using the RNS data, was also able to see that Onfi was going to be a safe medication for me, that it wasn't going to cause seizure activity. My brain wasn't freaking out with it. So today I'm on one medication. I take Onfi, 15 milligrams once a day. I take that at night. And my doctors were able to use my RNS system over the course of 6 months to slowly reduce and remove those 3 bad medications that I was on. Also, a lot of patients experience improvements in things like memory and mood, cognition, language. So it's not like the RNS stimulation is going to give you bionic memory, but it's the fact that it's starting to treat those seizures to where those normal functions of the brain can start working normally again. So people do see improvements in short-term memory now having a chance to get stored into long-term memory. Also with thinking improves. I used to have these issues where I'd be talking to someone and then 10 seconds later, I'd be like, what was I going to do? I was going to do something and I forgot. We ended up seeing with the RNS data that it was actually seizure activity going on. And then also these seizure meds, they were also affecting all those parts of my brain too. So by reducing those seizures, by reducing those medications, I did see big improvements in everything from memory, cognition, language. Language used to be a big issue for me where I'd be talking, all of a sudden I'd be like, what's that word? I forgot that word. I had trouble with word finding. So we ended up seeing that it was actually seizure activity that was disrupting that. Almost 17 years ago, I was getting close to 4,000 to 5,000 stimulations per day for seizure activity that was going on in my head. So you can imagine if your brain's just irritated, all that activity going on, my normal functions in my brain were just in a jumbled mess. So now today, 17 years later, I get about 80 stimulations per day for those spots that are still in my brain. To this day, we don't know why I have seizures, if I have, if it's genetics or scar tissue in my brain, we don't know. But we do know that we have my RNS device dialed in to where it recognizes within milliseconds of that seizure fingerprint, when that seizure activity starts showing up, stimulations provided, and then nothing happens after that. Some other questions get asked is travel. So if you go to the airport, what I just do is I tell the TSA agent, implanted medical device. I don't have to say what I have, why I have it. And they just point me over to the full rotating body scanner if the airport has one. If not, they just quickly wand me. So getting through the airport is really quick and easy. Also, I can have full body MRIs done under certain conditions. And what that means is if I needed an MRI, my doctors using their tablet and that same wand would put my RNS device into MRI mode to protect it. And then after the MRI, they would put my device back into therapy mode. Another question that gets asked is driving. So people can definitely have driving as a goal on their list. Just like anything, it's not a guarantee. I did get my driver's license back after quite a few years. I was able to get a California medical suspension from DMV released. And so I was able to get my driver's license back about 6 years ago. So, I know this video, all this information sounds like a lot of information, but remember we put, like the RNS device is there doing its thing in the background, just, there while you're just living life, doing what you do. You can be as active participant in your care that you want in the beginning. Like using that seizure diary is a great way to say, hey, doctor, this is what we were doing, before that seizure happened. Could that have been a seizure trigger? Also, using that RNS magnet to say, hey, doctor, here was the seizure I felt. I was aware of this seizure. Because what that's going to do is it's going to help you and your doctors kind of put your seizure puzzle together. Like once you have that seizure puzzle together, it's like, oh, there it is. Like now we see what's going on. And that's just going to help you guys be able to come up with the best treatment plan for you, which means that's just going to help you be able to live the life that you want sooner by kind of saying, hey, seizures, like we now see you and we actually feel like it's time for you to move on. A lot of people also experience improvements in seizure worry. For a lot of us and even the parents and care partners of, people living with epilepsy, we're always worried about having a seizure. I used to have this really high seizure worry, and I think it was a way of my brain kind of like protecting itself by kind of telling me, subconsciously, don't go over there. You're probably going to have a seizure. And so I just, didn't do things. I kind of socially withdrew, because I knew if I went over there, I was probably going to have a seizure. And if I have a seizure over there, I know those people, and they're going to call an ambulance. And then I'm going to end up in an emergency room somewhere that I just want to be discharged home. And so I'll be discharged home with an ambulance bill that I have to try to pay, that I didn't even want. And I was just like, all of that is just way too much work. So again, I just kind of socially withdrew. What I noticed was as my seizure worry went down, including my seizure activity, that's where I just started feeling more confident in myself, more independent. I started going out and hanging out with friends, and I knew my friends were now just talking to me as Mike instead of Mike with epilepsy. I just felt like a normal person. A lot of people living with uncontrolled seizures also have poor quality of life. So a lot of questions I get asked, like, will my life improve? And it definitely can improve. Like once you start reducing that seizure worry, once you start feeling more normal, like people aren't labeling you as, you have epilepsy, a lot of people feel, they start to notice their friends start to disappear because, when you live with epilepsy, you're kind of a burden. You're a lot of work. And so a lot of times people start to withdraw and, your quality of life starts to diminish. A lot of people, might lose their job, might be on Social Security, disability, might have had to drop out of college. Those are all things that, really affects us. It affected me. I was on Social Security disability for a lot of years. I was just always waiting for that magic treatment to come along. It never came along, in the early years. So that's where I kind of noticed that my quality of life was really bad. And I was just like, I'm really tired of living with epilepsy. Actually became really pissed off at epilepsy because it was kind of, dictating who I was, what I was doing, where I was living. And I was just kind of like, well, what do I want to do in life? And so that's where I decided to go to college. I started college in my early 40s. I thought I was going to be really bad at college because, my memory is poor. I couldn't remember a textbook page I just read, couldn't do math correctly. I was really afraid that I was going to have a seizure, in the classroom or on the bus going to college. And so it was tough the first, year or so with college. But what happened was, as I started feeling more normal, that just like all my classmates, I felt engaged. I started having conversations with people. I started working. Like first of all, I graduated with a master's degree in social work, even worked at Mayo Clinic as a social worker in Phoenix, together with all my doctors who's been treating me all those years. I was actually doing rounds and going in the same rooms that I had been in as a patient. I never thought that I would be in a spot like that. When I started working, that was really scary for me because, for me, making the decision to get off of Social Security disability and start working full time, that was scary for me because I had been on Social Security for so long, had socially withdrawn for so long that I wasn't sure if I can do it. I was scared. But I did it. I started doing more things, traveling, and my quality of life has just improved. That was another thing that the RNS data showed us was the seizures that I was having in my sleep. I knew I was having a lot of big seizures in my sleep, but I just never knew how many. This is where the RNS data provided my doctors and I that information about my sleep. So what we ended up seeing was in the first hour and a half of me falling asleep, the last hour and a half before I woke up, that's when I had my largest seizure activity. We also saw I had like the seizure spiking going on throughout the night that was preventing me from going through my normal sleep cycles. So I was always getting poor quality sleep. I was waking up 3 or 5 times a night for no reason, and we ended up seeing it was seizure activity. So having that information, my doctors, one, told my RNS device what kind of sleep seizure activity to look for and when to provide stimulation. And then my doctors had me adjust my medication so that I was better covered when I first fell asleep because we had months and months and months of data that said every single night I fell asleep, I was going to have seizures. So we were kind of like being proactive with my rescue medicines before I went to bed. So by doing all this, one, I noticed it helped reset my body clock. So, instead of me being wide awake at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was actually like at 10:30 at night feeling like, hey, I should get ready for bed. Today, I sleep all the way through the night. When I wake up in the morning, I actually feel rested and clear-headed. And so that was removing another seizure trigger from my life was by me helping, RNS stimulation, helping me get better quality sleep. And by getting better quality sleep, that also was a huge improvement on my quality of life too. Also, what I experienced, and a lot of people have shared with me too, is the RNS data in a way like provided me a voice for what I really couldn't explain to my doctors. Before I had RNS that was actually capturing all these seizures, when I saw my doctors, they would ask me, the common questions, how are you doing? Any seizures since the last time we met? And I would just kind of like shrug my shoulders and laugh a little bit going, yeah, I think so. I didn't know what my seizures looked like or how long they lasted. I didn't have a clue because I was having seizures. Or I might say, this person over here told me I had a seizure. So now I'm telling you, and the doctors would just write down, patient reports seizures, like needs a new medication. And so, the RNS data, what I found was I felt like I was finally being heard and seen by my doctors. And they were now acknowledging me. Like they were telling me after looking at my data, saying, you're right, that was a bad seizure that day. And I would just laugh again going, I know, I was there. And so I felt like I was being believed too, and that was really empowering because when you live with uncontrolled seizures for so many years, a lot of times, like when ER doctors are telling you like, no, we don't know if that was a seizure or not, you sure? After a while, you start to doubt yourself. And so this is where the RNS data, it really just provided that information for me, my doctors, removed the mystery about what was happening. And I was able to kind of like forget about what happened and take a step forward in life. So again, there is hope once you get RNS. Talk with your doctors about, using the RNS data for things like medication management, using that seizure diary to find, like, was that a seizure trigger in my life? Should I try to adapt or avoid that? Stress or anxiety, how can I reduce that? And then as you're moving forward, if you have more questions, definitely talk with your doctors. And then you can also reach out to NeuroPace. And at the end of this video, we'll have resources that you can reach out to NeuroPace to talk to either myself or one of the nurse navigators here on the patient education team.